Hello, this is a tutorial for people helping to prove this localization process. I'm using a sheet of dialogue for the mobile game Spurpunk to translate localization in the game as well as dialogue in the game. And the reason I set this up is because localization is pretty obvious. You have these buttons named a certain way that are called out in the script, and in the English column here you can see their original names, and some of these things are sort of general within mobile games, like a guidebook, there's a shop, there's a credit screen to give credit to people who helped with it, leaderboards. This is a game that is a tower defense that has cards. So a lot of these just have basic general explanations within any kind of a mobile game. And the translation for it runs horizontally through the sheet. Now, initially, just to get something going in the game, we translated these all across and then used Google Translate in green to do a placeholder translation, which of course is going to be a lesser quality than a person. So when people go down these and replace them with the actual language they speak, like we had a native Chinese speaker come through here and replace it with doing it by hand, they colored these cells white to indicate that a person had been through them instead of an automated process. So when these are replaced, please turn them white. And what happens here is that we wrote a little menu in Google Spreadsheet to export it. And I will do the exporting, but to explain the process, the person comes up and just hits export, and it exports these menus in these languages as XML files. And the game simply reads them in. So it's a nice way to try and get localization for people that are trying to make international mobile games. And we're currently trying to prove this process works. So to compare it, people that are helping out doing these translations, please do so and run the gamut of these tabs to see what each of these has, like a monster translation, things like that, to see all of the ways that we're trying to describe in game to the player in their chosen native language how to play the game. Now for the guidebook, a lot of this is going to be kind of simple and standard. Again, even the store tab has things such as a generators and electrical tower, but the descriptions, now we get into kind of a gray area. The descriptions are more than a word, so the translations can't be literal in some cases. I don't assume that English is translated the same way in Spanish as it is for Korean or for Italian or French. There are different ways to describe the same thing. So in these areas, you have to use your filter of how a native speaker and a young demographic too. The languages are not always the same. To go through this and then see the descriptor and turn that into something for, say, Russian or French or Italian, but it makes sense. So the human has to be the translator here, because there may not be a word-for-word translation for this, but as long as you get the point across to the player, then that helps. To do that, you had probably best played the game Spurpunk, so that you know when it's called up to say, well, what does it mean? What does it mean when it says card zap? Well, by virtue of playing the game, you will know. So please download Spurpunk TD. This is on the App Store, but it's also available for Google. It's a free-to-play game, and you just play through it. And these are the screens that you should see and get familiar with, because these are the items that I'm talking about. So each of these cards and each of these store purchased items are translated here in this localization page. But to know the context of what we're talking about, what is a steam-powered dreadnought? What is that? Well, when you play the game, you'll actually see, oh, it's one of these towers. I see what they're talking about. So a lot of context can be answered by playing the game. So please do that before you take on the translation, because a lot of context won't be provided just by looking at this sheet. So this is a playful, fun game. There are sometimes puns in here that won't translate in English. So keep a sense of humor about it. If there's a way to phrase things that's slightly humorous, but it does get the point across, then great. The guidebook also has descriptions of each of the monsters. And so her icy stare can freeze a tower solid. You may have a different way of translating it in the native, in these other languages. So play the game, understand what this means, and there's probably another way of phrasing it that does the job describing it to the player. Cards, again, monsters get caught in a slippery slick. Try it. That's probably not going to translate to every other language. So these can be a little harder, need a little more finessing, because I don't want just an analytical, clinical translation. I actually want something that feels like you're speaking natively to a younger person. The demographic is, the younger generation for this column of the language, if that's what you're doing, if you're doing French all the way down. Going to the dialogues page, it's actually a little harder, because the localization page is just that. It's all, the different words and descriptions in the game. The dialogue page, which is a different page entirely, is one that talks about the tutorials in the game. And here I'll show it to you here in the game. When these characters slide out from the left to right, we need to describe that in the sheet. So we actually do that here, because all of the characters that talk in the game have a little row here. They have a column. So Sean, Margarita, Phil, the ghost we just saw, Mickey, the bad guy, Itztamna, the other good ghost. Sean is the guy, the spurpunk himself. Margarita is the card dealing witch that is the hero as well. So all these characters here have names, and over here these are when it plays in the game for certain tutorials, etc. Down here, if you scroll down a bit, you can actually see that each level has a little story point. This is just a note section for the person. This is nothing happens here. This is just a note for the people doing the translations. So level 1, you'd have Sean come out and talk to the player. And so it's sort of numbered here what gets said. Howdy partner, welcome to Death Valley, etc., etc. And then it goes to number 2 and it says that. And then it goes to number 3. And each time there's a bit of art. Like all these descriptors here for the emotion are actually the name of a bit of art showing that emotion for that character. And it comes out on the left. So Sean would say on level 1 when it starts, howdy partner, welcome to Death Valley. Let's start your training to be a spurpunk and keep zombies out of town. And the art that would come out to announce that would be the welcoming image of him coming out on the left. And then once the player clicks on it, that slides back off screen and out comes this other bit of art, which is the friendly art, coming on the right side. And this is F for flipped. So it's flipped over. So it's reversed so that the character still kind of looks like they're, so it's a little more central to the player's eye. Level 5, the automaton, the story point. Sean comes out, says, I just designed a barracks tower. You've got the demonstrating art coming out on the left. So everything in the parentheses has to stay in English because it's actually a command in Unity. It can't be translated. We just need the dialogue translated, not the numbers, not anything that's colored or in a in any kind of brackets or parentheses, because those are commands that need to stay in English to tell Unity what to do. So this art comes out, the demonstrating image on the left, and this is kind of a command for what happens during the tutorial. So just leave that alone. The only thing we need is translation for the dialogue itself. Sean would say something, and then he'd say something else with different art. And now this character over here, Phil, comes out, and he says lines 3, 4, and 5. And in other cases, down here on level 6, Margarita would come out and say something, and then Sean comes out, because this is 1 and this is 2. So in each case, we just need the dialogue. This needs to track the same way for, say, the Chinese sheet. Here, when you click on it, you can see that everything is kind of the same, save for the black dialogue. So everything in the parentheses is still colored. It's still exactly as it is in the English sheet. And what happens here is we hit an export menu when this is done, and it exports this whole thing into one XML. So the color coding here is kind of the easing the eye of the user. Every 10 levels, we just color coded it here on the far left to to help the person doing the translation. But whether it's Chinese or whether it's Hindi, you can see that the wording has changed, but none of the commands. So that's really the long and short of it. So every following tab that gets put on here, whether it's Korean, Italian, Russian, has to effectively start as a copy of the English US version, and then all you do is translate just the black dialogue. And that's why, so that when you see it in game, I just designed a new barracks tower. It builds clockwork automatons. Try it out, partner. Same thing that you see right here. Try it out, partner. The demonstrating art coming out on the left. This is the command for click, select build spot, select build spot. You click, you build this, and again, it's a tutorial. He comes out, you can really change them up. So you see how this works. You can change the gather point by moving the flag. And then after I click on it here, it's going to go to Phil. And thank you all for just get a hold of me when it's ready to go in, and we'll take a look at it. Thank you.